Hello everybody, welcome back to another video in what might end up becoming a series. I have not decided yet. I don't like to commit to series because if I get burnt out, then I've given you false hope. But this kind of goes hand in hand with my albums that shaped me series that I did for a little while. I did about 5 episodes. And I know my buddy Steve at All the World's a Stage asked about resurrecting that series. And I've been thinking about it, and there are a lot of albums out there that mean a lot to me that I listen to, but there are very few albums that have really as a standalone episode. So what I'm thinking I'm going to do is kind of maybe do a few episodes on specific bands that I've grown to love and my story with them, and that way I can share multiple albums that it's an album that's very important to me, but I might only have a couple things to say about it. It doesn't have a huge life story behind it. So there's probably going to be some overlap with some of those episodes that I did in terms of showing albums that I've already shown as standalone. But this is kind of a broader picture. Might be a little bit longer of a video, hopefully not too long. But what better way to start than by giving you kind of a breakdown on my relationship with the greatest band of all time, the Fab Four, four mop top kids from Liverpool, those lads from across the pond, the Fab Four, the I don't know whatever else you want to call them, the Liverpool, the Liverpool Four. I don't know, the Beatles. That's what I'm talking about. If you couldn't figure it out from that code that I was giving, this is just gonna be kind of an episode about how I got into the Beatles, where my relationship went, how it followed different paths, and where I am with it now. So this is kind of a free-for-all. Don't fully know where I'm going to go with everything. I've got a few talking points, but let's go ahead and get started. So I've had the Beatles in my life for most of my life. Probably, when I first remember really hearing music, other than like sing-along VHS tapes that I used to watch, like Disney and, um, you know, just, kids' music kind of stuff that I would hear from my parents or that they would put on the TV and that sort of thing. I remember getting, again, this album, which I did a video about, The Beatles 1, which came out in the year 2000. Got it on cassette tape, and, this is a greatest hits collection. 27 songs. Excuse me while I indulge myself. That's for you, Gary. The Beatles 1 has everything that an aspiring Beatles fan would want. I mean, it goes from Love Me Do all the way up to The Long and Winding Road in 1970 from Let It Be. And again, we all know this album. It was, I think at one point, it was one of the biggest selling albums of all time, if not the biggest selling compilation of all time. I don't know the full stats, but I knew this album frontwards and backwards. Again, I had it on cassette tape. I think I got it in my Easter basket. And we had it in the car all the time. So I remember singing We Can Work It Out and Ticket to Ride and Hey Jude and Lady Madonna, like all those songs, knowing this frontwards and backwards, and knew that the Beatles were an older band. Like I knew that this was like an oldies tape, being 5 or 6 years old. Really, really got into this, but that was really all that was really all I knew. That's really all I cared about for the Beatles for a very long time. Close to that time, 2001, I remember, and I'm not going to go through solo Beatles because that's its own thing, but I'm going to make reference to this. I think my dad got this when it came out in 2001. This is called Wingspan, Hits in History, Paul McCartney. And obviously, Paul was in Wings, his band after the Beatles, very successful in his own right. Even if Paul was just in Wings, he'd be eligible, he'd be worthy of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And I remember specifically hearing the first disc of this a lot. And I remember this ad being on TV. I remember these hands appearing on the ad on TV as a little kid. So he had songs like Listen to What the Man Said, Band on the Run, Live and Let Die, silly love songs, Uncle Albert, Let 'Em In, the big Paul McCartney tunes that were on this first disc. And really, really liked it. Didn't necessarily make a Beatles connection. I just remember these being very good songs. And to be honest with you, I don't even think I ever made the connection until I started really getting into the Beatles that, oh, they, branched out after the Beatles broke up and Paul had this massive solo career with Wings. So, Hits in History by Wings, again, I didn't listen to this that much because it was my dad's and he probably had it in his car, or tucked away with the rest of him and Mom's collective CD collection that they had. But this was also something I just remember specifically seeing these hands on TV and this being promoted quite heavily. Again, a year after the Beatles 1 came out. So they were still capitalizing on the success of that record, I suppose. So that's about all the Beatles I knew, from, again, 2000 up until obviously I knew some of the other cuts that were off of, that were not on Beatles 1 to an extent. I knew a few. I knew, what's some that was on here? Here Comes the Sun was not on here. I knew Here Comes the Sun. Gosh, I didn't go very deep with the Beatles. I'll just say that. I knew other songs, but I didn't know songs like their cover of Long Tall Sally or, Matchbox and songs like that. I didn't know those types of Beatles cuts, those B-sides, and a lot of those early deeper cut covers. So, fast forward to 2009, and for reference, I am 29 years old. I'll be 30 next year. So put that in perspective about where I am in terms of, oh, you didn't get the Beatles until you were in the year 2000. No, I'm 29 years old. So in the year 2000, I was 6 years old. So I was quite young. So 2009 comes and we get this. And for reference, I was not a kid that played a lot of video games. I was not a video game kid. I started playing guitar when I was in 7th grade. And that was kind of my entertainment, was playing my guitar, and hanging out with my friends and playing, with my army men and things like that, like action figures. I played with toys. I didn't necessarily play. I had some handheld video games, but I was not a video game freak. Maybe for maybe 1 year period. And this is the year that it happened. The year 2009, I believe it was either 2008 or 2009. The Beatles Rock Band video game came out, which, if you don't know Rock Band, it's a game where you have, these fake instruments and you're following along on the screen, kind of like the old Simon memory game. And it's color coordinated and you're playing along to the song while hitting the coordinating colors that are scrolling down your screen. So I got the Beatles Rock Band. I saw it advertised. The graphics at the time were incredible to see, these animated Beatles on the screen, and to watch them go through their career. It starts with them in the Cavern Club and the vests and the white shirts, looking very young, and it goes all the way up to the rooftop outfits and that concert. So you get the Beatles their whole career, and you get to watch them, and they have these incredible graphics that went along with the songs. They even use a mashup from the Love soundtrack, the Cirque du Soleil Love soundtrack. That video game was it. That was what blew my mind. Hearing songs that I'd never heard before that I had to play because of the game. Hearing the song Revolution, the single version, with that, hearing that, hearing the very jammy, bluesy I Want You, She's So Heavy, hearing the absolute masterpiece While My Guitar Gently Weeps, hearing the jangly, lighthearted I'm Looking Through You from Rubber Soul, hearing Boys from Please Please Me, Twist and Shout, that realizing they were the ones that made that version of Twist and Shout. I had never made that connection. So that was what opened my mind. And then at the same time, we get this announcement that George Martin and Apple Records are reissuing the studio catalog of the Beatles, their UK albums remastered. And I was like, I've got to get Beatles. I've got to buy the Beatles. And I was not collecting music. I had CDs and everything, but not a bunch. Maybe 50 or 60 CDs. And I was like, I've got to get these Beatles CDs. I have to. But I didn't know where to start. So I based my purchases on, the first one was based on the cover. That's the first Beatles studio album I bought. This is the one from 2009, Abbey Road. I'm going to get to that in just a minute. Um, I did a video on Abbey Road, a second favorite album of all time. Listen to that album, and again, matching some of those songs that I already knew from the Beatles 1, like Something and Come Together were both on Abbey Road, obviously, the tracks 1 and 2. So I knew that. I knew Here Comes the Sun. Didn't know anything else about Abbey Road. But very few albums in my life have blown me away the first time I've heard them. Abbey Road is one of those select few records. I listen to Abbey Road, hearing that medley at the end with the reprise of You Never Give Me Your Money coming in with Carry That Weight. I didn't realize musicians could connect music like that, that you could take a song that was earlier in an album and bring it back into another song. Hearing that incredible drum solo on the end by Ringo, hearing the beautiful harmonies on Because, hearing the immediate cutoff of I Want You, She's So Heavy to flip the side over into Here Comes the Sun, hearing the growling vocals on Oh Darling, it is just a perfect record to me. It is perfect. And I was like, that is incredible. I need more Beatles music. So I was buying it, at that point, buying them in no particular order. I was basing it mostly on songs that I knew. You know, this album has a lot of songs that I know more than this one. I'm going to buy the one that I have more familiarity with. So I buy it. Again, at the same time, this is kind of neat. My uncle had purchased Anthology 1 that came out in the 90s, and he let me borrow it. And I burned Anthology 1 onto Fujifilm blank CDs. And this is actually my only copy of Anthology 1. This is it. This is my copy of Anthology 1. I don't own a real copy of Anthology 1. So yeah, that was just, and that's my writing it all on there. And the same with the Love album. My best friend growing up had the Love album. He let me borrow it. Oh no, my cousin Ethan, I believe, actually loaned me the Love album. I took it home. I burned it. I printed off a piece of the artwork from the internet. And again, this was 9/28/2010 that I burnt this. So September 28th, 2010, almost 13 years ago exactly, burnt the Love album. Because I wanted that version of Within You, Without You, and Tomorrow Never Knows, which appears on the Beatles Rock Band, this version. So I wanted that for sure. One of the earlier Beatles albums that I bought was Beatles for Sale. And I bought this specifically at a time when I was going to the beach with my family, with my parents, sisters, and my grandparents. And this album will always remind me of the beach, Edisto Beach in South Carolina, when we went. Again, 2000, I guess it would have been 2010 that we would have gone for this album. Because it took me about a year because I didn't have a job, so I didn't have money coming in. So I was saving up, bought the album, $12, $15, whatever it was, bought it. A few weeks later, bought another one. And this is what's often considered one of their weaker albums because it's mostly covers. And by this point, the Beatles were pretty well established in their career. It's album number 4, just after their completely original album, Hard Day's Night. And just before their completely original, not completely original, but their great soundtrack, Help. So this fell right between the two big movies, Help and Hard Day's Night. Probably the most sentimental Beatles album that I listened to. Again, you have like their ill-fated Mr. Moonlight, which a lot of people don't like, but you also have great moments, like they do a fantastic version of Words of Love by Buddy Holly, No Reply, Babies in Black, I'll Follow the Sun. This is just one of those albums that always reminds me of the beach. It will always hold a special place in my heart. It's still about in the middle for the Beatles albums for me, but I hold it higher than a lot of their completely original albums. So Beatles for Sale really held a sentimental place in my heart. I remember buying Sgt. Pepper. Again, know the cover. I was actually kind of worried about this album because I was afraid it was going to be a super druggy album, and I was like, ooh, I don't know if I can listen to this. But I remember buying it because, again, from the Beatles Rock Band, they had the Sgt. Pepper into With a Little Help from My Friends medley, the 2 songs back to back. They also had Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, which I knew because I'd seen the Yellow Submarine movie when I was a younger kid with my best friend at the time. And remember being really freaked out by it. I hated the movie Yellow Submarine. It's the only time I've ever seen it. Getting Better was also on the Beatles Rock Band. So was Being for the Benefit of Mr. Kite. And then again, I knew Within You, Without You, the Love version. A Day in the Life I knew. And so I knew a lot of songs on this, but then hearing it all once was just incredible. It's one of my most played albums. The spine, you can see, is turning white because I've played it so many times. Again, one of the 2009 reissues. Played it over and over and over again. I thought it was so cool. I wanted a Sgt. Pepper suit very badly. Just absolutely love this album. Yeah, and I remember all of these albums had like the PC mini documentary about each album, so that was always neat to plug into my laptop. And I should say also during this time, I'm getting into the Beatles. I'm playing guitar. One of those early finger-picking songs that I learned was Blackbird from the White Album. It's one of those songs that I've never perfected. I've been playing it since 2006. Still don't fully know how to play it. Never will. Only Paul McCartney knows how to play it correctly. And I remember the White Album being a little bit, I remember specifically laying on my floor listening to this for the first time at my mom and dad's. And then when they finally get to, I remember there being like the weird songs on here, like, Why Don't We Do It in the Road? I was like turning it down because, it was about, two monkeys going at it essentially, that Paul McCartney saw in India. And then like the weird songs to me, like Piggies was weird to me. Savoy Truffle was weird. Sexy Sadie was weird. Long, Long, Long was kind of creepy. And because I bought this and I was like, ooh, Revolution's on here. And then I saw the one. I didn't know what that meant, but I was like, okay. And was a little disappointed when I got home and listened to this and realizing that was not the Revolution from the Beatles rock band, that it was obviously the acoustic kind of, shoo-wop version that they did. And then I remember listening to Revolution 9, that second to last track, and just freaking out hearing it. I was like, when is the song going to be over? What am I listening to? This is wild. And then you go into Good Night with Ringo at the end and hearing him like kind of whisper with like you can hear like his spit in his mouth very close to the speaker, which I like that song a lot. People dog on it all the time, but I like it. But this is not one of my favorite Beatles albums. I know it's a big favorite of a lot of people out there. But again, pretty heavy stuff on here too, with like Birthday, Back in the USSR. Your Blues is a heavy blues song. So White Album was another big one for me. And I remember one of the last ones that I bought was Magical Mystery Tour, just because I thought the cover was weird. I thought it was going to be way too psychedelic because I'd heard Sgt. Pepper and I was like, there's no way I'm going to like this album. But then I'm looking at it, I'm like, well, I know Hello Goodbye, I know Penny Lane, I know All You Need Is Love. And I heard I Am the Walrus, so I was like, I know like half this record, so I bought it and was like, wow, this is really good. Hearing a song like Your Mother Shall Know, which is one of my favorites from there. I love the schmaltzy Paul McCartney show tune kind of stuff. I love the opening track. I love, again, the thematic element of Magical Mystery Tour, opening it. Again, side 2 is just a bunch of bangers. Blue Jay Way kind of creeped me out. Flying, I didn't really get. And then my best friend growing up was like, I really like the song Flying. And so I listened to it more. I was like, yeah, it's pretty good. So Magical Mystery Tour, I think, might have been the last of the studio albums that I bought, if you don't count Yellow Submarine, which I actually just bought last year because I didn't need it. But again, during this time, around 2010 or 11, for Christmas, I received a Crossley record player from Santa Claus. And the album that was left under the tree, this was my first real vinyl record, other than like a couple of like really junky things that I found, like at antique stores or whatever. So this is my first actual playing record that I ever got. This is one of the George Martin 2009 copies. And I just thought it was so cool hearing Come Together on vinyl. And again, just listening to it over and over again, sitting on my floor, watching the turntable, looking at the artwork, really looking at the art, because now, like, I had the CD, like this size, and then to have this was just fantastic. And then again, to see the Apple label on there. So this was a really, really cool thing. I will never give this away. Again, my first record ever, my first Beatles album, my first, just holds a very special place. And part of that, and I'm filming this actually on the anniversary of the date that they took the picture of the Abbey Road crossing. And I wanted to show this. I talk about it a lot. It's been in a couple of thumbnails, but and those of you that follow me on social media, I changed my picture of this for today. This is my copy of myself, my cousin, a really good friend, and a buddy of ours from college, crossing the zebra crossing in 2016, January of 2016. What's really cool is that our stride is exactly like the Beatles, even with my cousin Caleb, who is in the Paul McCartney or the Ringo spot. Um, no, excuse me. No, sorry, looking out backwards on my screen. My friend Landon, who's going, his leg is the opposite of myself, Caleb, and our friend Andrew. His leg is going the other way unintentionally, just like Paul McCartney. So that's very cool. This is me in the front with a backpack. It was a cold December day. One of our other friends from college was able to take the picture, and I was very happy to have this. This is on canvas. It hangs in my apartment. A treasured memory. I remember seeing the road, just being speechless. I didn't say much to my friends because this was like Mecca to me. Going over to the Abbey Road Studios to the gift shop and looking around, buying some guitar picks and a t-shirt, buying a couple things for my sisters who are also Beatles fans. It was just a magical, magical evening in London in 2016, my senior year of college. And I remember the train ride back to our hotel. I was standing up, holding the overhead bar, and I was just like shaking my head, like I cannot believe that I got to cross Abbey Road. Like that, I'd never thought that would happen in my life. And my friend Landon caught me kind of in a moment of disbelief and was kind of like chuckling, like, I know what you're laughing at. I mean, I was like, I don't know what to say. Like, I'm literally speechless that I got to do this, and I would love to go back. Just an absolute top three, possibly, maybe top moment of my life in terms of just things that I've seen and traveling. I will treasure this moment, and it's just a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful point in my life. And with that, I continue my love of the Beatles. Again, I am happy that I got my sisters into some of the deeper Beatles catalog. They also played Beatles Rock Band with me. Introduced my parents to some of the longer studio albums, because my parents, maybe some of them, did not listen to the full record. And I would play some of it, and they'd be like, "Oh yeah, I remember that song," and just songs that they, just don't listen to, that I brought back, and I thought it was really cool. I always played it on my iPod, driving back and forth to school for the whole car to play along. Just put it on shuffle or just play a full album all the time. I listened to Beatles so much. I bought the Hard Day's Night and Help movies. I've got Beatles posters in my apartment. I've seen Paul McCartney twice in concert. I've seen Ringo once. The Paul McCartney shows were pinnacle moments of my life. Seeing him do I've Got a Feeling with John Lennon last May with my sister Maggie in North Carolina was just a moment I'll never forget, and a moment I teared up watching Paul and John harmonize together on I've Got a Feeling. I went to the Independent Theater back in, what year was this? 2016. I saw the 8 Days a Week movie, the Ron Howard documentary about the Beatles touring years, with my mom and my youngest sister Betsy. Saw that, and then at the end credits, watched the Shea Stadium concert that was playing. Again, just kind of one of those full circle moments where, like, here's my youngest sister. I'm going to this movie with my mom to see this movie. And I remember taking a picture outside with the poster outside the movie theater, and the sound was just incredible. I follow along with the Beatles. I watched the Get Back documentary. Am I a Beatles complete fanatic? No, I don't own all the U.S. copies. I don't collect Beatles records necessarily, but the Beatles are the greatest band of all time. Sometimes I'll go a year without listening to them, and then I'll be reminded of how good they are, and I'll plug in one of these CDs or one of my albums and be like, yeah, they're up there. They are the standard. So yeah, I could keep rambling. I'm sure there's a lot that I've forgotten. Oh, one of the things too that I remember reading while I was really getting into the Beatles was this book called A Hard Day's Right, which has the backstories of every Beatles song. And again, I ate this book up, talking about the album themselves and then the actual songs, who was playing on the sessions. This was a fantastic read. If you don't have it, get it. I have 2 copies of it. I've been given it as a gift a couple different times. So, yeah, I love the Beatles. They're fantastic. I'm so happy that Paul and Ringo are still out there making music and are still relatively healthy. I'm glad when we get these box sets from Giles Martin. I'm glad when we get this last Beatles song, Now and Then, that's coming out. I eat it up. I love the Beatles. I absolutely love them. And that's a little bit of my story with the Beatles. I could do another full-length video and tell different stories, but this is the one I'm going to stick with. Let me know what y'all think. Comment. I'm sorry that it went so long, but I knew it was going to. So hopefully you like this. Let me know if this is a series you'd like to see continued with other artists. And yeah, I'll listen to you, or maybe I'll just say, forget y'all, I'm just going to do it anyway. So anyway, y'all be good. Take care. Subscribe. Get me to 900 subscribers, please. And we'll talk to you on the next one.